Okay, dye plants. Dye plants are incredible. When I was 10 years old, I used to get dye plants from my grandmother. She'll have all these pots laid out, multiple fires, and we would collect different parts of different plants and try to produce different colors to be used in her weavings. One of the things that she taught too was mordants. These dye plants, you can dye wool, and a lot of times they might fade, they might wash out. It's because people might not have used any mordant on that dye. Mordants are metallic. You can have iron, you can have copper, cobalt, sulfur. You can have there's like iron, there's like the plus stage, +2 stage, +3 stage. So forth with copper, like +2, +3. And one of the things that's very important, those positive iron or metallic ions, they're very hungry for electrons. And the wool, it's charged, electrically charged with electrical ions. So when you dye, put your wool into a dye solution, there's a lot of chemistry that's involved where you get these chemical bondings. And the mordants is what helps to stabilize the color. And it also helps to sometimes to enrich the colors, make it more brighter, more deeper. And some of the stuff that I use as mordants, well, you can use like plants as mordants as well. You can use sumac berries or sumac, or you can use juniper as a mordant because it has a lot of tannic acid, and that's what helps to set your colors. You can also use different types of lichens, like different Ucinus species. There's a lot of ucinic acid in those lichens. Even some lichens produce some very unique colors as well, lichens by themselves. To get our whites, we often use gypsum, clear gypsum. This is called selenite. It's like a calcium and hydrous mineral. So in order to use it, we call it tseson. It means like tse is rock and star, something that you see through. And you drive out the water from it. You try to break it up as much as possible, and then you put it into like a hot heat. You let all the water get driven off from the crystal structure, and it'll start to turn kind of like a whitish color. And what it turns into gypsum, the mineral gypsum onto the mineral anhydrite, which is minus the water. And the more it starts to break down, you keep pounding until the whole thing turns to white. And by that time, it's all anhydrite. So after that happens, you start getting your wool. You get it, you either just rub it into that solution, rub it into your wool, and in certain cases, you can rehydrate it where you put your wool in that gypsum solution back with water and boil it back into your wool, and it'll turn your wool really white color. And that white wool that they use is usually water resistant, is stain resistant as well. You know, like to a lot of different, things that will potentially stain your white wool there. Other mordants that are used are, these are a little bit more fancy than what you would find in the wild. So here's a piece of lead sulfide, galena. You can find small bits of this and break it up and put it into your boiling water with your plant, and it'll be a pretty good mordant. Here's a very good one. These are azurite crystals from the Santa Rita mines in Silver City. Azurite is an ore of copper. So you can get your copper mordant from copper ore, grinding up the rock and putting it into your solution. There's also pyrite, fool's gold. There's a lot of iron in here, iron sulfide. So you can get like plus 2 iron from this. Then you can also find metallic mordants from ions from malachite, also a copper ore, greenish ore. And then there's also one that we can get some zinc from, zinc ore, which is called wolfenite. These little bladed crystals. So you can use zinc as a mordant as well. And then you can also use here's another zinc ore called smithsonite. So you would probably take this portion of it and just pulverize it and grind it and put it into your solution and get all your metallic ions that you need. Alum is another good mordant. Alum is the one that's mainly used by the majority of the people, the majority of the weavers that are out there. Okay, let's see what kind of plants are available to us. Here's 2 different types of Psammopteris. This one here is Psammopteris acalis variety Fenleri. This one here is Psammopteris bulbosa. Plains biscuit root, and this is what we call our Navajo carrot. So within about maybe another month, these will probably be ready to start harvesting. You dig in the ground and get the roots out, and they're edible. And what you do is, if you get a whole bunch of this, and you peel the outside fibrous rind, you can eat the inside fleshy white portion of it, which I think is more tastier than carrots. It's very kind of sweet. So what you can do is you can strip all the bark and save that. And you get enough of that bark, and you can use that as a dye plant. It will produce kind of like a brownish yellow to yellowish dye, like different shades of yellow. One of the things that you got to realize too about these dyes too is that depending on what time of the year that you collect these plants, they can vary. Like there's a plant called Rumex, Canagri dog, that grows in the sandy area. When you dig down into the ground about that far, there's like a bunch of little tubers like potatoes. They're all clustered there, maybe like 12 tubers that are attached to that root system. So you pull that out, and then you can use that tuberous part of it. If it's a very young plant, it'll produce like a yellowish orange. And if it gets into like a middle-aged plant, it's more like an orange color. And if you get like an older plant that's starting to dry out, it'll turn like an orange brown. So your dyes can vary just based on the time of year that you collect that particular dye plant. And also, like I said, here's the secret too, these charges. Like if you use a mordant that has an iron with a +1 charge, your dye is going to be yellowish to yellowish brown. If you use a +2, it'll go to a brownish color. If you use a +3, it'll go to a brownish green color. So it's kind of neat. Plant dyes are all about experimentation. You know, there's a lady out there, out in Arizona. Deschini is her last name. She uses like about 875 plants as dyes. I mean, she has a very extensive knowledge of dye plants. And she's constantly experimenting, constantly producing new colors. And that's what you know, the Navajo Nation, I'm working on the floor of the nation. There's probably a little over 2,000 different plant species on the Navajo Nation. So look at all the potential of colors that we can produce from those plants. Now, here's if you want like your yellow colors, a lot of your yellows are obtained from the flowering tops of these composites. Like here's rubber rabbit brush, Chrysothemis nauseosus, Chrysothemis greenii, Green's rabbit brush. So when these flowers are at their what they call at the very peak of their flowering period, when they're extremely bright yellow, that's the time to collect them. You take the flowering portion at the top and you can boil that with your alum and you can produce different shades of yellow. And then the green portion of it at the bottom, if you use just the green leaves and the stems, that will produce different shades of green. You know, light green to like almost a little bit darker green. Now these are also, if you want to produce like a red colors, there's a plant, there's in this group, the mountain mahoganies. There's curly leaf mountain mahogany, and then there's the barricaded mountain mahogany. These will give you the reddish colors. You use the roots or the bottom bark of this. You shave off the bottom bark, or you'll take the root, kind of shave it. You put it into the water and you boil it. The more you have, the better, the more deeper your colors get. And this is called stazi. Tseh meaning rock, stazi meaning it comes out of the cracks of broken rocks. And that's one of the only places where you find them. Here's another red dye plant group in the family of the Betulaceae. This is water birch, thin leaf alder. This is also another very good reddish dye. The lower parts of these plants, like on the trunks of them, you shave off the trunks of those, and you can use that to get a red dye. One of the things that when you see in those moccasins, like the moccasins that we have, the reddish ones, they use a combination of these two plants together to produce that color. If they use only one of these plants, then it might be like a yellowish red. If they use both plants together, then it's going to be a very, very deep red, like a maroonish red. And the way they do that is, there's several methods. This one method is they'll take juniper berries or juniper scales, modified leaves, and with the smaller branches, the branchlets, and they'll burn it like into an ash. And then once it turns into an ash, in the meantime, they'll have their moccasins soaking in water, their leather soaking in the water. And the leather will get all wet, soaked up, and then they'll take that juniper ash and they'll physically rub it into the leather, both in and outside. They rub it into there. And then they take that moccasin and then they'll put it into the solution of this thing first. And then once they put the moccasin into a solution of mountain mahogany, and then they'll finish it up with the alder, thin leaf alder, or water birch. And that's what produces the really bright reds on the moccasins. So that's a really good reddish color. Red is also obtained from like shades of pink to red, from like the reddish fruits of prickly pear cactus, the opuntias. The reddish capsules, the persistent capsules, the fruiting capsules, which are, by the way, are edible. When they turn a bright red color, maroonish red color, it's time to collect those. And you mesh them up. You just pound them, mesh them up. Put into a solution of cold water. You don't boil it. You just let it sit there for like 2 weeks. Put your wool in. You can let it sit there for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The longer it's in there, the more deeper your colors get. And that's how they produce those kind of like reddish, pink, reddish colors from the opuntias. Here's a neat dye plant as well. A little Mahonia repens, a little barberry, holly grape. There's a lot of common names. It's kind of interesting. I'm writing the flora with very technical, and I'm including all kinds of information on this thing that I'm working on. One of the things that I'm researching and I'm digging out are the synonymous names that are applied to these plants. We have a plant called Western Wallflower, Ericiums. Ericium asprum, Ericium capitatum, depending on the author that you follow. I found out through researching back on that name alone, Ericium asprum has been described under 54 different names. And right now they've been all lumped into synonymy. And they're still trying to figure out what to call either asprum or capitatum, based on who described it first and like which age predates the name. I think they're going to go with the oldest name on that. Douglas fir was described under 29 different names. So it's kind of neat, playing around with plant names like that. Here's Mahonia repens. When the plant is in flower, it produces bright yellow flowers. You gather enough of those bright yellow flowers, and that will produce a light yellowish dye. And once it matures and produces its berries, it will produce kind of like a bluish color, bluish purplish color from the berries. The roots too, you can use the roots of this plant as a dye. It produces kind of like a really like a brownish yellow dye from the roots as well. So this is a multi-use plant. You find it under in the Ponderosa Pine Zone, way up higher, like around 7,000 to 9,000 feet in elevation. Yes? The Navajo name for this one is Chechil Yaja. Oh, Chechil is Yaja. Yeah. Which means Seh means rock plant that's hard. The small rock plant that's hard without audio. See what else I have. All right, here's a plant called a Rocky Mountain bee plant. This portion of the bee plant, if you produce like lavender colors as well, like really like pinks and lavenders, and you got to get a whole bunch of it though. Like you got a big old bulk of it and kind of pound it and start boiling it and put your mordants in and see what color you get. So that's also a potential dye area. And then some of your cactus flowers are also dyes as well. These reddish dyes, there's a lot of reddish pigment in here, and those are what converts to our colors there. Okay, so some of the colors that are produced, I like to thank Dee for bringing these up, and she's the one that's been experimenting with some of these, and look at all the colors that she was able to produce. When I'm back home, I try to put on a plant dye lab, where we'll go out and collect all these different plants, and then we'll bring them all back. We'll get all these pots and pans, and we'll start boiling and making all these different dyes, And, you can get like some blues, some purples, and, all these shades of different natural tone colors, Like here's a really nice one. Here's a Navajo Tea. Navajo Tea is interesting. It'll produce from this color to like nearly that color. It all depends on where you collect it from and also what time of the year you collect it from. I think one of the things that's really important too is that might be interesting to play around with is to take the same species from multiple sites. Because the geochemistry in the soil, wherever these soil nutrients, these minerals that the plants are uptaking, is being incorporated inside their roots, their stems, their leaves, and their flowers. And when you do that, one area might have a little bit more iron than this other area might have a little bit of copper and iron mix, And you might have like two different populations of Navajo tea, and you produce dyes from them, you might get two different colors from that. So that's why it's highly recommended when they dye plants to dye like a whole batch of it. Like when you're producing a huge rug like that, your colors are going to be somewhat uniform throughout the whole rug. Is there any questions? Anybody?